Did they recognize you there?
Well, in the cities, yes.
So all the children knew that this is James Bond?
Oh, yeah, James Bond or Simon Templar, the Saint, the Santo. But out, when one was in the rural areas, you got away from the city, no idea whatsoever.
But isn't that a little bit amazing that this character is known everywhere in the world?
Which one, Bond?
Bond, I suppose.
Well, yes. No, not really, because, there have been... I made 7 Bonds. Sean Connery did 6, and then he did another one that wasn't part of the same production team. And there was one with George Lazenby, there have been 2 with Timothy Dalton. So Bond has been showing... how many generations have grown up with Bond? It's 1961 or 62, I think the first Bond was made. So that is 3 decades, over 3 decades.
You came to play Bond after Sean Connery. What are the main differences between these 2 Bonds?
Well, Sean is Sean, and I am me. I wasn't trying to impersonate Sean.
But did you try to change the role of James Bond some way?
No, we played it differently to one another because we're 2 different people. Sort of acting in films as the leading man is usually... It is the personality you bring to the role, which is your personality. And people like you to be the way they... if you're popular in one thing, they want you to remain popular in that way. They don't want you changing in midstream. Sean, since finishing Bond, has played everything, from a Russian admiral in, what was it called? The Tom Clancy movie. To an Irish cop in The Untouchables, and in Name of the Rose, an Italian monk, and he plays them all with a Scottish accent. But
your James Bond, for me, it's a very humoristic person, not so serious.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that came across. It's because I don't really take that type of hero quote seriously. So the only way I could play it was slightly tongue-in-cheek.
Some people even say that the sense of humor is some kind of self-protection for you.
Self-deprecation?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is. Of course it's protection. You make a joke, hoping that somebody's not going to punch you in the mouth. Because if you're smiling, it's very difficult to be hit.
Okay, let's have a look. What was so funny, actually, in the Bond films?
I'd like to know. Siamo soli.
Finalmente. Such a delicate touch.
Sheer magnetism, Danny. Pick one. You knew the answer before it was given. Strangely enough, somehow, so did I. quite revealing.
Where's Kananga?
Well, he always did have an inflated opinion of himself.
Did you enjoy yourself playing this very charming playboy agent, actually?
Did I enjoy myself? Well,
Yeah.
yes, I enjoyed myself.
Doing that.
I had fun. I liked working. I liked the humour that I found in Bond. I liked the humour that they gave me. You see, I wasn't being particularly amusing, but the things were.
Did you, by the way, find out the jokes by yourself? Or was it the director who, or the script writer?
The jokes, they were usually a collaboration. We would try taglines for a scene. And maybe, particularly when I worked with Lewis Gilbert as a director. And he would say, what are we going to say today, dear? And I say, well, let's try. You've got any ideas? He says, apart from on the written page. And the writers were in accord because I used to get desperate when we started shooting Bonds because before the shooting there has to be a long period of finding the locations, etc., etc. And the script sort of is the last thing they're thinking of, the actual words. And so I would get in a terrible panic, and it would always be, and Lewis would say, it's always this way. We don't have to worry about that. We're going to put it right on the floor. And we invariably did. We would shoot maybe 5 or 6 jokes to find which one worked best.
Yeah. When you now had a glance at these old Bond films, did you enjoy yourself looking at them? Do you feel proud of them?
No. No, I'm rather embarrassed about what time has done to me since then.
Yeah, but, they are still dated, aren't they?
Yes, I guess so. What they dated for the fact that I know how long ago I made that.
Mm. But do you have any idea what was actually behind the great success of these films?
When Dr. No was made with Sean in 61 or 62, a friend of mine came over to direct something else for Broccoli and Saltzman, who were the producers of Bond. And he said to me, he'd come over to direct actually a film with Bob Hope called Call Me Buana, and they were going to be in London and then go to Africa. And he said, I traveled 6,000 miles, he says, and these 2 crazy guys made me sit down and look at a movie. This is called Dr. No and James Bond. And I said to them, you're going to take this out and sneak it, meaning are they going to have previews before they open? They said, no. He said, well, you're going to get laughs. But they said, no, we're not going to get laughs at all. He said, you'll get laughs. And they did not realize the humor there was in Bond when they were making it straight. Then after that, we went for the humor.
So you think the humor
why
perhaps...
didn't answer your question, why they were successful. And so when that first Dr. No went out in America, it didn't do particularly well until John Kennedy, who at that time was president, said quite publicly that James Bond was one of his favorite books, and he loved the movie. And all of a sudden, every Democrat in America, every Kennedy fan said, well, we've got to go and see this. And they took off from there. And I think it was because they came along every 2 years. And rather like telling a child a fairy story, you can tell him the same story night after night. You mustn't change the words. Mustn't change anything. They want to hear it. It is reassuring. And I think Bond, more or less, virtually each story is the same formula.
Yeah.
You're going to have this and that and that and that. They're going to finish up, and the prince rides off into the sunset, with with the bride on the back of the horse, and they live happily ever after.
But by the way, did you develop any special traits for your role as Bond? I mean, lifting eyebrows or things like that.
No, that was Simon Templar. The eyebrow got lifted.
But no traits at all? No special?
No, I don't think I was. I would hope not.
Yeah, because I was just wondering, perhaps it was just the something in your eyes, the twinkle, that made the success.
No, I can't claim that, because Sean had done 6 already, and they were very successful.
No, but I don't want to flatter you, but anyway, I don't know. There's something magic in the way you make the Bond. Something humoristic thing.
I love you.
Okay, by the way, one ingenious Finnish journalist wrote in his column that my intelligence can be compared to that of Bond girls. And now I don't know if I should take that as an insult or a compliment. What would you reckon?
I think he was trying to be, or she, was it a he or she?
He.
A he. He's a chauvinist pig for a start, isn't he? How dare he say things like that about you? What he presumably is trying to say is that the leading ladies, or the ladies in Bond, the Bond girls, not necessarily the leading lady, but the Bond girls, were decorative. And so in a way it's a compliment. You're very decorative.
But what about their intelligence? Well,
I don't think they were sort of handing out any Nobel Prizes for literature with the Bond girls.
Yeah, but at the beginning of your own career, you were doing some modeling.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, advertising, among other things, Brill Cream, the famous hair cream. That's what
I don't know whether
read.
I did Brill Cream or not.
I read it. It must be true, because it was in a book.
Everything you read, you believe?
Yeah, of course.
It's like believing everything I say.
But did you...
But I did. In fact,
yeah.
I met Audrey Hepburn for the first time when we in the late 40s or early 50s, either 49 or 50. And we were in a photographic advertisement for a cream against spots. Mm-hmm. And I don't know who was supposed to have the spots. I think I was gazing over her shoulder.
But did you have any difficulties just because you were such a very beautiful young man? To get good roles?
Well, sort of. I was pretty, right? Little tiny nose. There were pluses and minuses for it. It's very difficult to get taken seriously as an actor if you have pretty features. Of course, you get the roles, the juvenile leads in repertory, in theatre. And people sit back and they say, all right, come on then, let's see what you can do. And you have to grow and develop.
And you grew and developed, anyway.
I grew lines and wrinkles.
Yeah. But despite all the beauties that you have got around you as James Bond, you have been married for more than 30 years. Mm-hmm. So... Actually,
but I had 2 wives before that. So
okay, that sounds better. But actually, the Playboy Bond is a faithful family man in reality.
I would hope so, and if I wasn't, I'd be a damn fool to sit here and tell you any other way.
Yeah, and you have got children too.
I have 3. I have a 29-year-old daughter, Deborah, who is an actress.
Yeah.
A 26-year-old son who is a singer. He is busy writing. At the moment, an album, which is going to be produced early next year. And I have a 20-year-old son who has just started work as an assistant on a film at Twickenham Studios in London.
Mm-hmm. What have the children meant for you?
Oh, I suppose everything. You say, would you die for your children? Yes. Yes. No, my children were very close.
So you are really some kind of family man?
Very much so.
Mm-hmm. Not at all such a playboy?
Oh, no. No, I'm not a playboy at all.
Well, if we go now back to the James Bond films for a while, So here in Finland, for example, in the 70s, some so-called progressive persons, progressive intellectuals actually, they blame the Bond films for imperialism and sexism. Do you find any truth in those blames?
Imperialism
and sexism.
And sexism. I don't know
great words.
Where imperialism came into it with Bond. And sexism, I don't know. They, as I said before, they were sort of fairy tales. Nobody really behaves like that, and you can't take that sort of character seriously. How could anybody take Bond seriously? I mean, here is a man who's supposed to be a great spy, and he walks into any bar in any corner of the world, and the bartender recognizes him and says, "A martini, Mr. Bond, shaken, not stirred." Spies are faceless people. They're anonymous. They're grey. You don't see them.
Yeah, but many people took them very seriously. For example, here in Finland, I suppose some people really thought that they are consciously made as an ideological weapon against the communists.
Oh, I don't think so at all.
But you have heard something like that?
No, I haven't.
No?
No.
So it was only here in Finland, just near the border of Russia?
In fact, there was... In Russia, they were seen, not shown generally in the cinema, but in private screenings they had them. And Cubby Broccoli, the producer of Bond, was in Moscow and at the U.S. Embassy. And there were a lot of Russian guests and Russian military there. And they showed Man with the Golden Gun, in which Bond describes Scaramanga. When M asked him, "Have you heard of Scaramanga? You know who is Scaramanga?" And he said, "Yeah, well, he was born in the circus in Cuba. At 15 was a crack rifle shot. At 17, he was recruited by the KGB and trained. At 21, went independent. He now gets $1 million a hit." And at the end of the film, I kill Scaramanga. Bond kills Scaramanga. And one of the Russian turned around to Cubby and he said, "You did not train him too well."
Détente is a word that is very difficult to explain, but actually you managed to do that in one of those Bond films. Let's have a look at it.
That's détente, comrade. You don't have it, I don't have it.
The Berlin Wall is fallen. Did that mean some kind of death blow for Bond films?
Yes, it did. I think once the Cold War finished, you couldn't have Gogol anymore, that character.
So you won't play any more Bond films in Bond films? Are you sure of that?
I'm quite sure. I can assure you I won't be any more Bond films. I'm not likely to be asked.
But what do you miss most from those times, from those films?
I don't really miss anything from those.
You don't really miss anything?
I miss my youth, that's what I miss.
Yeah, but nothing else. It was anyway a very exciting life.
Well, yeah, they look fun.
And a lot of beautiful girls, by the way.
A lot of beautiful girls and a lot of wonderful occasions. When I was making the Saint series at Pinewood, I think our budget for one episode was about what we spend in half a day on Bond. And so we never went anywhere. We went onto the back lot of the studio. They put a rubber palm tree in front of my face, and it would say Bahamas on the screen. And I would be freezing to death in a silk shirt. And I even in one show that I was directing, it was raining, and we were supposed to be inside, and because they were economizing on lights. And so there was an open set, so it was supposed to be sunlight, but it was rain light coming through, and I was getting wet. And I stopped, and the man who was not to be my partner, the other producer, remained. He said, "Oh, go on shooting." I said, "We can't." I said, "The rain." He said, "Unless we backlight the rain, they won't see it. And we're supposed to be indoors." Anyway, I would say, "Oh, please, I would love to go to these places to film." Well, along came Bond, and all of a sudden I'm on those locations. Now, everybody else wanders around in a pair of sandals, a pair of shorts. They're dressed for the heat. But Bond, most of the time, is in a black tie, dinner jacket, and running around, jumping around, and never allowed to sweat. And so I perpetually changing my shirts, my jackets, because they would get wrinkled and wringing wet. So it was very difficult. The hardest part, I think, was looking as though you weren't sweating.
Yeah, so it wasn't so cozy.
No.
Not at all. Let's forget the Bond for a moment and step back. Step back a few years more. Because you were born, I have tried to count the right figure, 1927 in London.
Correct.
Yeah, so you are 66 years now.
66 and 2 weeks.
Yeah, so you had your birthday just when? On 17th?
14th.
14th, yeah. But anyway, your father was a policeman, wasn't he?
He was indeed.
Yeah. And when you were a kid, it was the war time in London, or partly? Well, yes.
I was 11 when the war started. I just started grammar school. I'd won a scholarship to go to a school called Battersea Grammar.
Do you still remember the air raid warnings and things like that?
Oh, air raid, yes, because we were evacuated 2 days before war was declared. And then nothing seemed to happen, and we came back to London. Then it happened. Yes, I do. I remember the first siren and the first bomb, because we lived right in South London.
What kind of memories do you have of the war and the wartime? Was it so desperate?
Well, as a kid, you have this optimistic outlook on life. That everything's going to be all right. And although we slept in an air raid shelter in the garden, what was called an Anderson shelter, which was corrugated iron and earth on top, which wouldn't stop a direct hit, but would deflect debris and shrapnel coming down. Yes, houses around seem to get, but you never think it's going to happen. There's always somebody else who gets knocked down by a bus. You never think it's going to happen to you.
Well, anyway, that is how it looked like, London in 1940. Can you even remember something like that?
Well, I was never up in a bomber, so I don't remember seeing the bombs falling away from underneath me. No, what is missing from that, fun enough, is the sound of bombs falling. And I'm sure there are plenty of people in Finland who remember that sound, which is it's a ghastly sound, because between that then you, and I think at that time in the first air raids, they had a whistle attached to the tail fins of the bombs, so that they howled, and you could hear them 50 miles away as they came down.
Audrey Hepburn, the famous actress and a very close friend of yours, once said that international aid organizations helped her when she was a poor child in the post-war Holland.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't remember any aid like that after the war?
Well, we actually didn't. We were never occupied in England, although we were severely rationed and we'd been quite heavily bombed. We did not need international aid.
Because I suppose one of the reasons why Audrey Hepburn did get into this UNICEF work was her own experience during the wartime.
Yes, she had told me that it was part of the reason. I think that it gave her an affinity to an organization that would help the young.
Was it Audrey Hepburn actually who convinced you also to take the job as the UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador?
Yes, she didn't say to me, become an ambassador. What she did was she called me about 5 years ago and asked me to co-host the Danny Kaye International Children's Awards from Amsterdam. Mm-hmm. And Audrey was a friend, and so I said, yes, I can do that. And I listened to her at a press conference. She had actually said, I was supposed to arrive. The show was going to be done on a Sunday, and I said, so I, get in on the Saturday. Shouldn't I? Can you come on the Friday because they have a press conference on Saturday morning. And I said, but I don't know anything about the show or the organisation. Why do I? She said, well, we'd like the press conference.
But how did you find the idea?
Well, I had always worked, for charities of various kinds when I lived in England. And at that point, I'd moved to Switzerland. Mm-hmm. And it seemed to me a good way of channeling my energies into doing what I think I should. And so having listened to Audrey speak, listened to her conviction, and I quite often said that sometimes I thought she over-dramatized. Mm-hmm. At that point, I did. And it was only, it must be a year or 2 years after that I became part of the UNICEF family. And then I realized when I started seeing some of the things that you find in the developing countries, that she was not overstating, she was understating.
Audrey Hepburn did really a lot for UNICEF, and she was dedicated to helping UNICEF in many ways and these impoverished children in many countries. But did you ever get to know what was behind her dedication?
Well, I think the fact that she had a heart larger than her eyes, and they were large enough.
Audrey Hepburn died of cancer last winter.
Yes.
In the next insert we hear her to tell about her work in her own voice. I suppose this is her legacy for us.
If you deny childhood, you deny life. They can't speak up for themselves, so we must. But it's like, how do you define love? It's a very, very deep feeling, but it's, I think, the most important force of life. I think I've been terribly privileged. And it's logic that somebody who's privileged should do something for those who are not. Again, that's the way I was brought up, and everybody around me and my family did so. Considered the right thing to do. I don't think anybody ever sat down and asked why. They knew why, because it was necessary. And what we do, or what I do, is very little. I mean, this is not a false modesty. I have a lot to be modest about. But it's necessary. Because finally, if a child has an accident, who is the most important? The person who makes the instant phone call, the ambulance who comes, the doctor who operates right away. Who saves the life? There's this curious, what can I call it, embarrassment, timidity that comes over one when you do walk into a feeding center like that, of, I feel I shouldn't be there, I feel I should leave them alone. It's like walking into somebody's room who is dying and only the family should be there. At the same time, longing to pick up one of these children and give it some kind of warmth. And on the other hand, they're so frail that you're afraid you're going to break them or hurt them. And it's unbearable. It just is so totally unacceptable to see small children just die in front of your eyes, obviously because they're starving, but also because they are so frail they really finally die of disease. And you somehow on one hand feel impotent, that you can't do enough, and you're not in time to save at least those little lives. And on the other hand, it's comforting to be there and see how much is being done and how much progress is being made. Politics, by definition, are supposed to be for the people, for the welfare of people. Humanitarian means human welfare and responding to human suffering. That's finally what politics should be, ideally. And that's what I dream about. And that's why I use this example, and it may be unique in history, that it's humanitarians that are keeping this country afloat. I think perhaps with time, instead of there being a politicalization of humanitarian aid, there'll be a humanization of politics. I dream of the day that it will be all one. And one of the reasons that I wanted to come to Somalia, not because I can do very much, there cannot be enough witnesses. If I can be one more and speak up for one child, it's worthwhile.
When Audrey went to Somalia, some critics accused her of seeking publicity by being photographed with starving children. Very tough words, aren't they?
Well, you saw the pictures.
Mm. How do you find this kind of criticism?
I read a critique of Sophia Loren, who paid a visit on behalf of the UNHCR, United Nations High Commission for Refugees, which was confused with UNICEF. And a paper sort of in England said, a publicity-seeking movie star for UNICEF. Well, I was very incensed and replied to the effect, first of all, let's get one thing straight. Sophia Loren is not with UNICEF, but on the other hand, what she is doing is as important. She is going there to bring the world's attention, the media attention, to a situation that could just be swept. It might be on the news, but not the next day. It would be forgotten. But if you have somebody like Sophia Loren, but particularly Audrey Hepburn, who was so moving and so sincere when she was photographed with this, looking at her, you say, there was one hint in her attitude in reaching out to touch the child kissing a hand. It was very moving.
What is your own conviction, or what is the reason why you do this work?
For the simple reason that Audrey said, it has to be done. It must be done.
Even if you can do very little by yourself.
No, all I can do is, I'm not a doctor or a nurse or a sanitary expert or a nutritionist. I'm an actor who is well known, and as I said at the beginning, you invite me to come and talk.
So you don't do this for money, for example?
Oh, I get paid.
How much?
I get paid $1 a year.
$1 per
Yeah.
year. But that's tax-free anyway.
They have it's completely tax-free. My agent takes 10%. My wife takes 50% of it.
Yeah. You have visited several Central and South American countries as a goodwill ambassador. How did these visits affect your own outlook?
Well, the reason I went in the first place was that all I'd read were facts. Oh, I'd seen the pictures, but I had pamphlet after pamphlet that have percentages and numbers, and 40,000 children die a day, and until you actually get there and you see those children, you start putting faces to numbers. When you see faces, they have names. And of course you're affected by it. You've been to Central America, you've been to South America.
Yeah, that's right.
And you have to be affected by what you see.
Yeah. But do you think your values have been changed some way?
Yes, they have. They certainly have, as far as someone who made a whole slew of action pictures with sort of guns and things, which I loathe. I hate the people that leave mines around, leave booby traps that children get maimed with. I hate the people that make them, the people that sell them, and I think this is an unfortunate world. Again, it's statistics, and I'm not sure if I'm absolutely accurate, but I think that if we spent the world's budget on armaments and defense, one day of that budget would feed all the children in the world for a year.
That's true. But let's have a look how it was when you were in Guatemala in Central America. You seem to be able to keep the same sense of humor even in this kind of circumstances.
Well, they all have humor.
Yeah, that's right.
They all have humor.
It looks that you have had a good time too. It was no suffering all the time.
No, it is not suffering all the time. You get a great deal of satisfaction out of it. I think if you, as you've seen, all the voluntary organizations and the people that go out are affected by what they see. And they have a good time in the sense that they are doing good. That makes you feel good.
The impoverishedness is often connected to war, to social and economical injustices. And these problems, they are so huge, they are very difficult to be solved, not even by UNICEF.
No, UNICEF can't solve any problem like that.
Yeah, how do you see then the role of UNICEF if it cannot solve these big problems that are behind all the impoverishment?
Well, UNICEF advocates for children, for children's and children's rights. We had a convention in 1990 which the nations of the world came to New York, the leaders, all the world leaders came, and they signed that convention. And subsequently, I think 137 countries have ratified that. It's up to UNICEF to make sure, on a government level, that those countries keep to their promises to children. But solving the political problems of the world, I have an answer, which is to take a part of the Sahara where absolutely nobody lives at all and put a great big 500 feet concrete wall around it and put all the politicians and all the generals that really want to fight. Don't make them take the foot soldiers, because half of those don't want to fight. And let them fight it out. Let the rest of us live in peace. But that's idealism. We're faced with the brutal fact that wars exist. You see, it's what happens in what UNICEF calls the world's silent emergency, which is the fact that it was, today it's approximately 35,000 children die a day. And they die from malnutrition, they die from preventable diseases that can be immunized. They can be immunized against. Every year children are born, so every year you have to go up, you have to follow up the vaccination, so it is an ongoing silent emergency. The loud emergency is when along comes Somalia, Bosnia, and I don't know whether you saw this week the pictures from Angola, where 3 million people are about to die.
You mentioned that 40,000 children are dying every day. Don't you ever get frustrated when you hear figures like that? They are so huge.
Well, it's almost beyond comprehension. UNICEF has managed to reduce that number greatly. UNICEF and other organizations, but UNICEF, I think, is the best of the organizations, which is why I'm with it.
Really? But as we all know, UNICEF is also a very bureaucratic giant. And many people doubt that their aid, the money they give, get through.
That's a very good question, because it is asked quite often, and it was asked of me by the US ambassador in Holland, who called me and he said, I'm a fundraiser. I'd like to know what percentage of every dollar goes to administration and goes to the child. So I said, I will find out for you. And so I called New York and I said, let me have, and so the budget reports were sent to me, and it works out between 8.5% and 9% is administration. There are just over 6,000 people employed by UNICEF, and 15% of those are in administration. The rest are in the field, and 2/3 of those in the field are people from the country in which they work, so there are no problems about communication. And they also know what tricks a politically incorrect government might get up to. So those governments don't get hold of the money.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds good. I'm very satisfied with this information. But the role of James Bond and the role of UNICEF ambassador, they are very far apart. Do you see any conflict in them or between them?
Well, if this were a movie instead of a television program, and I was here, I would be a role as a UN representative.
So it's not a role for
No,
you?
Bond was a role. Simon Temple was a role. Anything else I played, Hamlet was a role. No, this is real life. This is reality. I mean, I don't get up and walk away at the end of the movie with a smile on my hand and a girl in my arm.
Yeah. The saint, by the way, usually have a halo there somewhere around his head. Where's yours?
Got a little too heavy to carry.
Well, you used to play anyway the part of the saint in a popular TV series in the 60s. I was I suppose I was less than 10 years at that time, and that was my favorite in TV.
Well, it's very nice of you to admit it. I thought you were a lot younger.
How do you find it? Looking at your own face.
God, wasn't I terrible?
No, that was really funny. Didn't you find that funny?
That was the first Saint. I hadn't really settled into the character. I thought I would do it slightly differently today.
Well, I enjoy it myself anyway, so don't try to...
What I enjoyed was seeing the other actors, you know, like Patricia Rock and Derek Farr. It was also rather sad to see Leslie Charteris's name on the screen, because he died about 3 months ago, who wrote the Saint books.
Yeah. Do you think this saint, this Simon Templar, is totally, or was totally different man from this man who is sitting just in front of my eyes?
Oh, I was probably a little more selfish and ignorant in those days.
Uh-huh. So that is what is different nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
They say that when people get older, they get wiser. Do you agree?
I would like to think so. I think I've been wise in my decision about being with UNICEF, but I don't think that I am necessarily wiser.
Mm-hmm. But
I'm just longer in the tooth.
Really? But something must have been changed during all these years, in your values, your outlooks on life, and things like that.
Most certainly, life has become more real because I've seen more of it. In those days, I was very spoiled. You know, I was jumping from job to job. Let me think.
And you...
My daughter wasn't born. I had no children. Mm. So my life gradually started changing because during that period, the first year of the Saint, my daughter was born, and then a couple of years later, my second son. And my third son was born actually after the first Bond. Mm. So my children were conceived in different places. My daughter in Beirut, Jeffrey in Tunisia, and Christian in Jamaica.
Mm-hmm. Very international children.
That's a boring piece of information for you, isn't it?
Yeah, but anyway, at that time, I suppose you were a very ambitious young man.
No, I've never been particularly ambitious.
But as young people are, in that meaning.
Young people. Well, I already knew at that stage that the whole damn thing was luck. Mm-hmm. I'd been told when I started acting that to be a success you needed 33% talent, 33% personality and looks, and 33% luck. I'd say you need 99.5% luck. Mm-hmm. Because I know,
really, honestly,
I know and have known 100,000 actors and actresses who are much better than I ever could be. No, I'm not being modest.
No? It sounds like that.
No, I'm not. I'm saying that they did not have the luck that I did. Mm-hmm. It's being in the right place at the right time and the right part coming along.
Well, now you are 66 years old, even.
You keep saying that just to upset me, don't you?
Yeah, but one couldn't believe that when looking at you. But are you still going strong? I mean, you know what I mean.
Do a backflip out of the chair.
No, but I mean, what does the age mean for you?
Well, so far, sort of, the years haven't made that much difference in the terms of my physical activities because I still play tennis for 2.5 hours, which I do every day in the summer. Mm. And whenever I can, I'm up and down a mountainside skiing. I work out every day for 45 to 50 minutes. Not in a gymnasium. I work out at home without any equipment, doing calisthenics, running on the spot, sit-ups and push-ups, because I think that is very important for your own mental well-being, to keep the physical side going as long as you can.
But anyway, I have heard a rumor that Simon Templar is going to be revived in a movie version. Is that true?
Well, we're trying. Paramount have, for the last 3 years, been trying to get a script together. They've engaged a number of writers that have not quite got the character or the storyline right, and now they have signed 2 months ago James Yhden, who wrote Fatal Attraction, and he is in Ireland at the moment writing, and by the end of the year we should see what he has been doing, and hopefully they will have found the right formula.
So you will go on with acting anyway?
Yes.
But not with James Bond films?
But not with Bond, no. No, Bond, you can't come back with a 66-year-old Bond. That doesn't make sense. But Simon Templar can age, as he will do if I play him. And the idea is that at some point I find a son, which was Leslie Charteris's idea, that that there should be a son of the saint,
the little saint,
who becomes Simon Templar, and it's a son that Simon Templar didn't know about. How we tell that story is still being worked on.
But at this moment, if you really say honestly, are you missing something from your own, I say, manhood's best days, or something like that?
No.
No? You are very satisfied with your life at the moment?
Oh, I'd be a terrible ingrate if I weren't.
All right. I'm very sorry. It's a great pity for me that the time is coming to an end and we really have to part. So it's really a pity.
That's it.
But anyway, before you leave, I would like to make a suggestion or make a little question more. And that's, are you sure that you don't have any need for new Bond girls?
No, all I have a need for, if anybody is still watching this after seeing me for 60 minutes or 59 minutes, that they will pick up a telephone and call UNICEF or buy Season's greeting cards. This is the end of the UNICEF week, and the children need your support and your support.